Greetings, friends, and mostly enemies. Especially greetings to you, Max, my new favorite commenter. I will be addressing your comment from my review of The Savior's Sister at the end of this video. I'll drop a timestamp if you want to skip to that. I know you were probably waiting with bated breath for my rebuttal. So, as promised, as I know some of you have been waiting for, I finally got around to doing my read-through and analysis of The Savior's Champion. Today we're going to be doing a review of The Savior's Champion, spoiler-free. That's first for anyone who hasn't started the series, who wants to get into it. And then we're going to move into some more discussion about The Savior's Champion as it relates to The Savior's Sister. And after that, we're going to be bringing up some specific points from the book that really grated on me. It's going to be semi-structured, but really more of just a free-form bitching and moaning about stuff that I liked and disliked, what did and didn't work for me, and of course, addressing Max's comment at the end. But to be fair, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about before that has to do with her comment anyways, so yeah. So, as promised, first, a spoiler-free review of this piece of literature right here. The Savior's Champion is really good. It's not perfect, and I definitely have some issues with it that are going to be in the spoiler section of the review, so if you want the full tea, definitely stick around for that. But the long and short of it is that the book is good. There's some issues with the plot in that a lot of the circumstances and driving motivations from the characters are contrived. They're not very believable when they are thoroughly analyzed in the context of the full situation, and especially when you put them against real-world history, they don't stand up very well. And that's probably the biggest issue with the plot. The characters, in my opinion, are what saves it. Jenna has amazing characters. As I said in my review of The Savior's Sister, I think writing characters, and especially writing witty banter dialogue, is Jenna's strong point. She's very good at it. I love it. The Savior's Champion is a heart-wrenching human experience. It is emotional. We get to know characters in a very intimate way, and we come to empathize with them and root for them or hate them as we are supposed to do, as I said in my last review of Jenna Moressi's work. The lead, Tobias, is great. More on that later, but I love Tobias. The tournament, while we do definitely have a lot of books where some deadly competition or tournament takes place and it's kind of getting old, which I probably shouldn't say because there's one in my work. But the point is, it's a little bit overdone, but at least here it's done somewhat well. There's nothing super amazing original, but at least it's well done. So you can kind of read through it and still be entertained. And the subplots and the secondary character interactions are all engaging and believable, and honestly, the biggest waste of page time you come away with feeling at the end of the book is the main plot line and how it would have been much shorter if it wasn't so contrived. And in the context of the companion novel, I feel personally there's a huge plot hole related to the main plot, which again, I'll get into after this section. So, to conclude the spoiler-free general overview of The Savior's Champion, I really enjoyed it. It's a good book. If you're thinking about getting into the series, I recommend it. My only caveat to that would be is if you absolutely cannot stand the cannot spit it out trope, don't. If it drives you nuts, if it enrages you, if you can't get over it under any circumstance, then don't buy her books. At least not the ones in the Savior series. I haven't read Eve the Awakening. I might at some point, but not for a while. There's too much other stuff on my docket. So, thus concludes my spoiler-free review section of this video. On to the meat. So this slightly relates to the spoiler-free section, but I'm gonna mention it in the non-spoiler-free section because I just want to be able to talk plainly about it. I really feel like if I was a first-time reader and I was just picking up this novel, I may not have been able to figure out that Leela was the savior up until the end of the book, where Peepa tells Tobias that he loves the savior. That's where it would have been. I read that and I was like, yep, that's where I would have figured it out if I'd read this novel first. I might be being a little bit hard on myself. Sometimes I pick up on things a little sooner. I can say definitely for someone who's not very good at analyzing things and not very good at remembering clues that are dropped and not good at fitting pieces into puzzles, that's where the vast majority of people were probably going to get it. I think Jenna did that on purpose. That's where she meant for most people to get it. And she wanted to drop enough hints throughout the book so that the really smart people could get it sooner, or at least make it possible to get it sooner. So, yeah. Jenna did a really good job, in my opinion, of making it not blatantly obvious that Leela was the savior, except to the people who are really good at analyzing literature and that kind of thing. You have to be at least somewhat of a critical thinker and capable of remembering all the subtle hints to have gotten it before she made it painfully obvious. And she made it painfully obvious to the reader before she revealed it to Tobias, which is an interesting decision. And I'm not sure I would have done it that way, but obviously it's not my story, and I can't quite decide if there was a narrative purpose to that, if that was a deliberate storytelling decision, or if it just ended up working out that way. I would love to interview Miss Moresi and ask that question. Unfortunately, I doubt that'll happen, but it would be cool. Next thing, as I said, some of my points kind of answer a few of Max's criticisms, and this is one of them. This book is really good, but it suffers a serious issue that the Savior's Sister, in my opinion, doesn't suffer, because the writing style and the voice in the Savior's Sister kind of saves it from some of these issues because it makes it so fun and engaging to read. But Tobias's voice isn't quite as fun. It isn't quite as tongue-in-cheek. It isn't quite as snarky and fast-paced. Artificially fast-paced, by the way, because the books are about the same length and they cover about the same amount of time. But there's really more stuff going on in Leela's book. And so, well, then it's not really artificially fast-paced, is it? So, my point is, there's fewer things to distract the reader from the glaring plot issues. And the biggest issue for me is that the plot is driven by some really bad contrivances. It's driven by some really serious, I can't spit it out, and mismatched political motivations and half-baked schemes. And those include, but are not limited to, Leela not telling Tobias, no one else telling Tobias, or figuring it out, Bronte's tolerating Tobias's existence for so long, Bronte's tolerating Leela's existence for so long, Leela not just outright killing Bronte's and his entire Senate in a single night, the idea that the people of Thesson would just go along with it if Leela came out to them and said, hey, I'm the savior, my dad's trying to kill me, please back up your one true savior. The people would absolutely storm the fucking citadel if they knew the sovereign was trying to murder the savior. And anyways, to continue, it's like something that I think Jenna didn't take into consideration, or maybe doesn't have a very complete understanding on. And I don't want to badmouth her or anything like that. I'm just saying that maybe some historical research would have shed light on this, in my opinion. People get fanatical about religious belief, and the Savior is a religious figure. It's no secret that wars are waged over religion. And the Savior is a real-world figure in this story. People can see her magic. That would make the fanaticism reach levels that we can't imagine in this day and age, because there are no figures in this day and age who are running around performing miracles. We have no idea how bad religious fanaticism would be if someone like the Savior existed in the real world. So if Leela appealed to the people, she would be able to overthrow Brontes and his usurping of her power like that. And of course, that doesn't become an option until the Savior's tournament starts. But as soon as it starts, she could have just gone out to the arena full of people, gone down into the arena, got everyone's attention, and been perfectly clear about what Brontes was doing, and the Citadel would have been overrun by rioting citizens. And the fact that she didn't even consider that didn't even get brought up is just, in my opinion, a miscalculation or a lack of foresight on the part of Jenna. It was absolutely an option the whole time. People underestimate how much power the mob has. And if you are at the head of the mob, you can do some really scary stuff with the mob. Just saying. Hold that thought. Okay. Now, moving on a little bit. I don't know if it's because Jenna's writing improved from the Savior's Champion to the Savior's Sister, and I don't know if maybe this is only because I noticed more issues in this book, because like I said, the writing isn't quite as fun and engaging to me because there's a voice difference. But I feel like the action isn't as good in the Savior's Champion. I feel like in the Savior's Sister, the action scenes are better written, more entertaining, and more believable. Next point is that I really hope the magic system gets a little bit better defined, a little bit more refined, and more attention and more explanation. Right now, we're definitely in soft magic system territory, and the Savior's magic is currently very much on the holy magic tree. It's clear she has some kind of relationship with the sun, which is obviously in any kind of mythological lore typically associated with the forces of good. Light is a purifying, holy force, right? And it's also clear that she is associated with positive magic because she's a healer and her presence is restoring and she's capable of maintaining the health of the land itself. It's clear that a great deal of her power is rooted in holy or light magic, but not all of it. Her shadow walking is definitely sus. And so I would like to see that more explained. I would like to know what fuels her magic. Does she just have an unending divine battery? Is the sun her source of power? Positive emotion, which her relationship with Tobias and some of the things we see her magic do on its own from her interactions with him, such as her blessing him without meaning to. We know that her magic is rooted in light and positivity, at least partially. Like I said, shadow walking kind of sus. And I'd like to see that more hammered out and defined. Especially because if it doesn't get more defined and it just stays in the soft magic system territory, Leela could very easily become a deus ex machina. She could very easily just become the, well, I need her powers to do this right now character. And I hate characters like that. Most people do. Of course, characters that are flawed can sometimes get away with that. Well, this character has these glaring personality flaws, these glaring mental flaws, and so I can give them these unexplained BS powers because their personality gets in the way of them being the deus ex machina. And that could work for Leela because she's definitely traumatized and definitely not 100% on all cylinders all the time. But She's very intelligent, and she's very fierce and determined. And if she gets powerful enough with her magic, she could definitely be a runaway Deus Ex Machina. So I really feel like her power set needs to be defined a little bit better to prevent that. So hopefully we get that in the sequel novels. So I have some notes that relate to some specific things. We're going to jump into those now. One of the things that bugged me in The Savior's Sister, and it bugged me even more in this novel, because now we're seeing it from Tobias's side, and it's even more evident that it was preventable and he could have done it different. Why didn't Tobias still present his charcoal drawings? We get it. It was of Leela, so it would have taken some spin, but Tobias is a smart guy. And he had the ear of Raphael, who was a smarter guy. Between the two of them, they could have come up with a convincing lie. He could have said something like, Cosima, or Cosmina, or however the hell you say that redheaded whore's name. Cosmina, you have sent your delightful sister Leela into the labyrinth to heal us day in and day out. I take it as a sign of your magnanimous mercy and goodwill towards us, and so I wanted to thank you by drawing a portrait of your beloved sister. And he presents the charcoal drawing. Framing it that way, or some other similar way, would have still been very kiss-ass to the savior, Cosmina, and he would have been able to present a gift at the challenge. He would have won that challenge. And I know he didn't want to win the challenges, but he also didn't want to lose, because in some cases, losing a challenge meant possible death. You got penalized or hurt, and he knew that. So it was a dumb risk, and it was one he could have avoided. And another thing that bugs me about the whole thing is he's supposedly such a good artist, and he couldn't think to just draw a landscape or literally anything else. I get it, his muse was gone, blah, blah, blah. I'm a creative. That excuse doesn't hold water with me. True creatives know how to power through their block. If you're really good at being a creative, you know how to seek and find your muse when it's not there. And I especially believe that someone as determined to survive as Tobias and resourceful as Tobias, creative as Tobias, would have been able to power through it and draw something other than Leela. It's not my character. I can't say for sure. Obviously, it's Jenna's world, Jenna's character. She can do what she wants. That's just how I read his character. I personally think that him not being able to draw anything else was out of character. It's definitely kind of like a kind of feels like bullshit kind of moment in the plot. Another note about Tobias, and this one is kind of personal in nature, and it's gonna get a little bit real here, but I really love Tobias, as I said. He's resonated with me on a profound level pretty much from the moment I started getting to know his character in The Savior's Sister, and that only increased in this novel. I still give this novel, despite the fact that it has some serious issues, a good rating, maybe a 7 out of 10, because the characters are so good, especially Tobias. He's very real. He's someone who's intelligent, but skeptical. Well, I should say intelligent and skeptical. And yet, he's willing to suspend his own disbelief when he wants to. He's willing to cherry pick ideas and facts when he wants to, as all humans are. He's also very susceptible to his emotions, as we see. He is by no means a master of himself, as most humans are not. Namely, in the department of anger. And this is where I relate to him so much. He has a fight with Leela, and he says some things he really shouldn't have said. And I can't say all of us have been there, but a lot of us have. We know what it's like to be the monster, don't we? We know what it's like to wish we could take something back. We know what it's like to absolutely hate ourselves for what we just said mere moments after we said it, but we know we can't take it back. Tobias is a good character because he is so flawed and so believably flawed. I love the guy because I feel him. On a profound level, I feel his pain, his struggle. He wants to be loved. He wants to be with the woman he loves. He wants to have a purpose. And she is his purpose to him. And that's a beautiful thing. And he almost loses that because he can't control his rage. I understand that. So, Tobias, I feel you, brother. Now, with that, there also comes the consideration of why he was so angry. He was so angry because Leela had been lying to him for weeks. Weeks. About something important, about something that would have saved him a lot of grief and heartache, about something that would have made his direction and course of action much clearer, and something that quite possibly would have made the entire thing go down much smoother. Leela could have told him he was the savior pretty much as soon as she started liking him. She knew she wanted to ally with him. She just didn't want to let herself trust him because she was a paranoid, traumatized girl. Very sad girl type thinking. And Leela is smart enough to know that you can't do these things without allies. No matter how strong your magical power set is, no matter how smart you think you are, you need some allies. She's smart enough to know that. She's smart enough to know she should have told Tobias these things, and she admits she should have told Tobias these things way sooner. And Tobias forgives her, and I would forgive her too, but he lets her off with not he's more forgiving than I would be, to be quite honest. The point is, he was mad because Leela did something very deceitful that almost cost him his life on multiple occasions and caused him an immense degree of heartache. She shouldn't have done it. And from the reader's perspective, if she hadn't done it, we would have had at least 200 less pages of book, and what there would have been to read would have been much less frustrating, because Can't Spit It Out would have either been much shorter or not have happened at all. And so that frustrating, annoying, infuriating trope wouldn't have been an issue. So that whole thing is so contrived and so BS. It really grates on me, especially having now read Tobias's perspective and understanding just how much he was suffering, which Leela would have been able to see better than the reader because she's there in person, and no writer is good enough to truly 100% communicate a scene better than you could understand it being there in person. That level of writing doesn't exist. So, Leela would have known how much he was suffering better than any of us do. And we all know he was suffering immensely because he didn't have that little tidbit of info. It grates on me. And continuing on with that, at the end, finally, when Leela had decided to tell him, she could have just really quickly spit it out. Even if Delphi came through that door and said, hey, we gotta go, we gotta do this package, blah, 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 she could have told Tobias, hey, look, I need to go do this thing right now, but the thing I had to tell you is, I'm the savior. Stay here, I'll explain everything when I get back. And that would have made a lot of things clear to Tobias. He could have sorted a lot of facts in his head, organized his questions. Even that would have been better than waiting until she's literally glowing in the sun in front of him. Leela fucked up. At every possible opportunity to tell him, she fucked up. It's very hard to forgive her for that. You do it because she's smart and witty and delightful and beautiful and morally good. She definitely falls into neutral good. Maybe actually she's chaotic good, let's be honest here. So you kind of feel compelled to forgive her for that one. but it's still infuriating. Next point, and this is moving a little bit more towards the realm of action and what's believable and what's plausible and that kind of good stuff. Okay? So, in the tournament near the end, Tobias wins a 4-man fight. Him, the Prince, Flynn, the Dragon, and the Shepherd, who is the main villain besides Brontes, who's the main villain. And Tobias wins that 4-man fight by beating the strongest fighter, who is the Dragon, and that's not, I'm not assuming that, it's stated in the text. He's the hardest hitter, he's a trained soldier, he has a reputation as being immortal. There's no doubt about it. The Dragon's the best fighter on that field. Tobias beats him to death with his bare hands in a 4-man fight. That he was the sole target. Everyone was ganging up on him. Okay? So it's thoroughly established that Tobias is a dangerous combatant. Get him pissed off, and he's clearly capable of doing serious damage. And then the next day, he's knocked out by Kaleo in Leela's bedroom. Bullshit. Here's why. So in that 4-man fight, he had a lot of adrenaline going. And that's probably why he couldn't be knocked out, despite the fact that he was being restrained, getting punched, getting knocked around, all that good stuff. And he had adrenaline going when he was hiding under that bed, trying to avoid detection. It's hard to say if the adrenaline levels were comparable. Adrenaline levels and hormone levels and fight or flight response has a lot to do with your perception of danger. It's very obvious that in that 4-man fight, he was very, very aware that he was probably gonna die. So his perception of danger was at max level, which means his hormones were at maximum fight or flight. But he also knew that if he was caught in Leela's chamber, there was a very good chance he was gonna die. So his adrenal levels, again, would have been nearing peak. And I'm supposed to believe that all of a sudden, one guy knocked him out cold? Bullshit. It's bullshit. It's not believable. It's not how... No. Also, I just want to talk about that 4-man fight a little bit. As a guy who's been in a tussle or two, not to brag, I'm not a great fighter or anything. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington. It's not exactly a nice neighborhood all the time. And I have been in a 4-way fight where 3 people were ganging up on me. And I can proudly report to you, like Tobias, I won. The disclaimer to that is I was like 8 years old. But, you know, a bunch of kids try to beat up on me and I won. It's still pretty cool, right? So my point is, I know what it's like to be in a situation like that. The difference, however, that makes it a critical difference is that was me versus a bunch of untrained kids, one of which was younger than me. This was Tobias versus 3 of his peers, 2 of which were trained killers. Or it may be not trained, but experienced. It's not believable that he got out of that situation. See, there's a difference between an 8-year-old kid, like I was, beating up 3 of his peers and walking away from it because he had enough rage and physical strength on them to get the job done, and a difference between Tobias doing it in a situation where he's been getting beat up for a month and all that stuff. Really, the only thing that makes it savable is that he was blessed. Is that he was constantly in Leela's company, constantly getting that sweet, sweet magic juice by interacting with her. And so it is somewhat reasonable to believe that by getting that constant exposure to this holy restorative magic, he had been in much better shape for that fight than any of his 3 competitors. That's very reasonable. So I'd buy that, but only because we see how powerful Layla's magic is. So, thin ice on that one. And now a final note that's kind of unrelated to the story, but I want to mention it because it's a thought that has struck me repeatedly reading both of these novels. It struck me even before I read Savior's Champion. and it struck me even more after reading both of them. I think if you're someone who aspires to have a healthy romantic relationship with a member of the opposite sex, I think you should read both these novels. Because Jenna has done a wonderful job of creating a case study in miscommunication. You can get some very good ideas of what not to do in terms of communication by reading these two books together. And you can also get some wonderful insights into the opposite sex. I trust the way Leela is written and the way all the female characters are written, of course, because Jenna is a female writer. And so I truly feel like I got some interesting insights into the female heart reading this work. And gentlemen, especially gentlemen who struggle to understand the fairer sex, I recommend, if you like reading, you check out both of these books. You'll probably gain some interesting insights, especially if you read between the lines and really think about, character motivations and why people are doing what they're doing. And if you think you might be taking away the wrong message, just ask one of the women in your life for clarification. One that's preferably one that isn't crazy. And now, without further ado, Max, let's have a chat. Now, as I am addressing one of my commenters personally by name, I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to be polite. No name calling, nothing of that order, especially because I think Max is delightfully cheeky, and I don't want to pick a fight with someone who I enjoy my interactions with, but I disagree with some of your points. So let's get into it. Alright, so I'm just going to leave this up on the screen here while I talk about this. Okay, Max says, and we're going to attack this point by point. Max says, Zach, I'm confused. You're saying the plot all hinges on miscommunication and a contrived power struggle, but you still give this book 9 out of 10. Leela butchering senators like a homicidal debutante and leading Tobias in circles takes well over 50% of the runtime, but you're still rating it a solid 90%. What's it take to get an 8 or a 10 out of you? Bad writing. That's your answer. Bad writing. A contrivance, a frustrating contrivance, even one as frustrating as this one was, doesn't necessarily constitute really bad writing. Jenna's prose are very good, very well structured. She communicates well, and her characters are great, and I enjoy reading her dialogue. It's fun to read her story. Even if some of the plot points that drive it are very contrived, it's very fun to read her story. I deeply enjoy it. And so I'm willing to overlook stuff like that. Because when I go into a book, the main thing I'm looking for is to have a good time. That's my primary goal. I'm a pleasure reader. I want to be entertained. And Jenna does that for me. Max says, on a less contentious note though, I'm not sure Leela's plan was so much a plot hole as it was absurd contrivance to prop up the ongoing conflict. I don't think that's a semantical difference, so please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if that's something that I can quote-unquote correct you if you're wrong, because I think that might be somewhat in the domain of opinion. I personally feel it's a plot hole, because Leela is a smart character. She's not stupid by any stretch of the imagination, so she would understand that her plan has a lot of flaws, namely that if she just kills her dad and all these senators, there isn't going to be anyone left to challenge her authority as the sovereign ruler of the country, and so there would be no reason to not do that. You don't need to expose someone's network of informants and associates and spies and assassins when you kill all the top leadership. Especially when as soon as you kill all the top leadership, you get to fill the power gap automatically, guaranteed, because you have a 100% thorough mandate of the people because you're a religious figure, the subject of which is fanatical religious devotion. So, yeah. Ugh. So that's my cat. That's why it's a plot hole. Leela's smart enough to understand that. Max says, either way, I think Jenna's real problem is boring old inefficiency. If you write over 550 pages using slim variations of the same two conflicts over and over again, it's going to get repetitive very fucking quickly. An efficient storyteller could have covered Jenna's plot in half the time without belaboring the shit out of pointless reinterpretations of the same events time and time again. Agree and disagree. I think that you have some solid meat there, and there's definitely room to cut out a lot of the runtime by being less contrived. But like I said, I enjoy Jenna's writing. She's an entertaining writer. I like the way she tells the story. And that's why I'm willing to put up with the level of contrivance. I would have appreciated it if she cut out some of the runtime because the communication happened sooner. It would have been much less frustrating, and I think it would have improved the story. Probably would have upgraded my rating from a 9 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10 on Savior's Sister. And it's important to note that after reading The Savior's Champion, it actually brought my opinion of The Savior's Sister down because it modified my understanding of Leela's character motivations and made it more clear that it was even more contrived than I initially thought because she would have seen how much pain Toby was in. So, I think you have some solid meat there, and I'm not willing to just totally discount that point. I'd love to have an in-person discussion with you about that. I know it's not going to happen, but I think it would be a good discussion. And then finally, Max says, but then considering that her first book is essentially a carbon copy of this one, in that she added no further characterization, world building, themes, or plot to the original story, I guess there's something meta about that outcome. Okay, again, I agree and disagree. My primary disagreement with that is that she adds no further characterization. We definitely get more characterization of Toby and of some of the other men in the tournament, and I even felt like I got to know Delphi a little bit better in this book than I did in The Savior's Sister. I think that seeing these characters from the other angles definitely brings them into a more realized light. And I really feel like it's worth reading it if you truly love these characters, because you really get to see them in 3 dimensions. However, the rest of your point about no additional world building, no additional plot, absolutely true. I was really hoping that between the two of them, I would get some additional world building, and that didn't happen. And I was disappointed to see that. So hopefully we get it in the sequels. I really want to know more about the other kingdoms. I really want to know more about the magic system, and I'm even so interested in the world, I'd be willing to read through a few pages of exposition about the history of this fictional world, especially Thesson and some of the past Savior's exploits. So, I agree with you on that. And then, let me just say about your end here where you're like, maybe Jenna is a genius and she's trolling us and she's trying to get us all to follow her off a cliff, and and the conspiracy and the author tomb police and the black backing you. Please keep writing me comments like that. You have no idea how much enjoyment I get out of them. Do you see the smile? This isn't contrived at all. This is real. Please keep writing me comments like this. Please. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're at the end of the review, and much like the end of the book, now that we're at the end, I have a shirt on. So, I hope you enjoyed. I hope I covered points that you wanted me to cover. If I didn't, let me know in the comments. I'd love to talk about them more when Jenna releases the next book. I really enjoy this series. I'm going to be reading any additional entries in it for sure. Until then, like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube things. If there's works you want me to leave a review for on my channel, let me know in the comments. I'll go out and buy them and review them in due time. I can't promise how fast because I'm a slow reader and I have other things on my docket. I still have 3 people I need to interview and stacks of books I have to review, and I have short stories I want to write and upload for you as well. I got a lot of stuff planned. I just need to get working on it. So be patient with me, and see you next time, guys.